It's 4 o'clock in Radio Cairo. This is World of Info, and we're coming from Studio 3. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad is at the control, and we are with you here until 5 p.m. And today we have a very distinguished guest, Mr. Professor Istvan Ormos, the Professor of Arabic and Islamic Studies in Budapest Universities. And he has a very interesting career working as Professor of Arabic and Islamic Studies in Budapest. He had his education there, graduated from the university in 1978, and worked there since 1980, and ended up his career after pension in 2020. A continuous career in comparative Semitic languages, where he studied Arabic, Hebrew, Aramaic, and other languages also. And he came for a short period in 1978 till 1980, where he got introduced to the Islamic architecture, which began to be one of his side hobbies. During his tenure in the university, he had also the chance to work in the Oriental collection in the Budapest Academic Library 1 day a week, where he got an encounter with a very interesting photo of a very interesting man, Max Herz. Sir, thank you very much for coming to our program, and we really appreciate the time and the effort that you are consuming, and we have taken a lot of your valuable time here, sir. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation, and also for the possibility of being with you, and thank you for your interest in my work, and it's a great honor to me.
Well, we know how you are fluent in Arabic, of course, but this program will talk in English. And we also are interested to know that during your short stay in 2 years' time at your early life here in Egypt in 1978 to 1980 in Cairo University, you had a chance to go around Cairo. So what was your impression on Cairo and how it has affected you? Of course, anybody who comes to Egypt gets very much fascinated with the antiquities, whether these are pharaonic or Islamic history. Tell us about your infatuation with Cairo.
Well, I loved Cairo, which was a different city at that time, not as crowded. It was crowded at that time, but not as crowded as it is now. And I liked the city and the people very much. And I was really greatly impressed and fascinated by monuments of architecture. Not so much with pharaonic monuments, which I, of course, have a great appreciation for, but personally they do not affect me. I was much more interested and got infatuated with Islamic monuments. And at that time, I was working during the week, and in the weekends, I took my guidebook. At that time, there was an excellent guidebook about the Islamic monuments in Cairo, arranged in walks or excursions, and each weekend I made an excursion, and I enjoyed it very much.
This is the Book of Williams, the American ambassador, right?
Yes, it is that book, but at that time, the authors were different,
yes.
And I can't remember their names. There were two.
His name was Parker.
Oh, yes.
He was the ambassador to Morocco, and he was the DCM, American DCM in Egypt. He has written this book starting in the late 60s, early 70s. And then a lady by the name of Caroline Williams became also involved in writing the book.
But it was much later.
Much later. But during your time in 78, 80, it was purely by Richard Parker.
Yes. I mean...
it's a very nice book.
Yes. I mean, and of course, this book has been in print ever since then, and it is in print now, and you can obtain it. And the last, I don't know how many editions, were already edited by Caroline Williams and so on, and they're excellent. But when I started using this book, then Caroline Williams was not yet around.
Exactly, yes. The book is interesting because it also doesn't only give an input on what you're seeing, but also it gives a short resume of the history of the place.
Yes.
And perhaps at that time you got your first encounter with Max Herz.
Well, I can't remember that anything would have been in it about Max Herz, and I got my first encounter with Herz years later in the Academy Library in Budapest. And when I first saw this photograph, I had no idea who this person might have been. And I also asked my colleagues, and nobody knew it. Now already everybody says they have always known the name of Max Herz, but at that time it was not like that.
So we're talking about the 80s in Budapest,
yes.
And not a single person of your contemporary scholars who were with you in the university were very much oriented about the work of Max Herz.
No, you know, Max Herz, he had come to Egypt in 1880, and he was a very conscious Hungarian citizen and a Hungarian nationalist, one could say, and he had good connections with Hungary. And also with the Academy. He became a member of the Academy. But, you know, the end of World War I was such a break in the history of Hungary that his familiarity with him disappeared, and so later on people I do not say that not a single person knew his name, but at least the people I knew didn't know him.
So you got the encounter when you saw the picture of Max Herz.
Actually, it was not his picture.
It was a picture
of somebody else. I don't know who it was.
But behind it was
it was probably the picture of Max van Berchem, the Swiss epigraphist, but it is not yet sure. It is not sure either. I have sent the picture to the Max van Berchem Foundation in Geneva, if that was Max van Berchem, and they couldn't tell because it was a young man, and so.
So, who's Max Herz?
Well, Max Herz was an architect. He came of very modest circumstances. A rather poor family, and he studied architecture. He managed to study architecture in Budapest for 3 years, and then he went on to study in Vienna to complete his studies another 3 years. It was common at that time because the technical university in Vienna was better than in Hungary, so many people did the same thing as Herz. And then he finished his studies in July 1880, and he was just about looking for a job in Austria or in Hungary in the dual monarchy. But then in Vienna, by mere chance, he met an Austrian family who were just about to leave Vienna on their way to Cairo, because the husband there was the director, the manager of Hotel du Nil in Moscow, and they offered Herz that they would pay for his trip if he would accompany them all the way through Italy to Cairo in the end, in exchange for explaining to their children whatever they see on their way in Italy.
That's a very good deal.
Yes, that was an excellent deal. And you know, at that time, it was expected from architects in Europe that in Hungary too and Austria too, that after finishing their studies, they make a tour of the whole of Italy just to see everything what they had learned about, or at least northern Italy. but Hertz was poor. He couldn't have afforded it. And so he was all extremely happy to seize this opportunity. And then he came with his family, and it was in July that they left, and they arrived sometime in the autumn. And then Hertz thought that, well, once he was in Egypt, it would be a good opportunity to have a look of Egypt too and go around Egypt, because he had learned so much about ancient Egyptian architecture and so on and so on. And in Cairo, while in Cairo, he was introduced to another Austrian, Julius Franz Pasha or Basha. He was at the time the head. He was an Austrian architect, and he was the head of the technical department in the Waqf ministry. And this Julius Franz Pasha was looking at that time for European architects to work under him in the technical department of the Waqf ministry. It was called Qalam Handasat al-Awqaf, and he made an offer to Hertz, and Hertz accepted it.
So we're talking about 1880,
yes,
and this is coinciding with two important parts of our Egyptian history. First of all, in 1879, Khedive Ismail was dethroned, was forced to abdicate of the throne of Khedive to give it to his elder son Tawfiq, under the pressure from the European countries and the powers of that time, the British and the French, who were having a lot of debts that Ismail failed to pay. And it was up to Tawfiq in 1879 to rule Egypt at a very young age. And Tawfiq had a great interest about Islamic architecture. His father, Ismail, was the one who was responsible for modernization of Cairo and doing the what we know the new Cairo or the Ismailiyat Cairo. But Tawfiq was more interested in resurrection of the Mamluk, especially the late Mamluk style. And this is the one who was doing this all through his life, and followed even by Fuad, who were very much interested in promoting the neo-Mamluk design, leaving behind two things. The first, which is the Ottoman style, which was used to be even during Muhammad Ali reign, and also to go back also away from the European style in building the structures cohorting with the new Mamluk style. So you think that this is how Max Herz had the chance to work and to promote his ideas about the Islamic architecture, whether it's the new one or the restorations that he was responsible for?
Well, it is partly true, but there was another point that Khedive Tawfiq founded at that time the Comité de Conservation des Monuments de l'Art Arabe, Lagnat Hifz al-Asar al-Qadima al-Arabiya, so that they should, this committee should restore monuments of Islamic art. Later on also Coptic, but at the beginning they didn't deal with Coptic monuments. And the reason was partly his interest, and second, you see, Egypt had a very special case, Egypt was just like Italy or Greece. It was the center of human culture and the font of human culture, and it is a very nice thing from one part, and from the other part it is not. It has also unpleasant aspects. It means that the whole world thinks that it is their common heritage. So I mean, if in Hungary, Hungary doesn't care about its monuments, nobody cares, because it is a affair of Hungary, private affair. But if for instance Greece, doesn't look after its monuments, then the whole world is upset, and everybody is convinced that they have the right to get involved and to dictate what to do with them. And everybody and it was the same with Egypt. And with Egypt, the problem was that Muhammad Ali confiscated many waqfs, so the maintenance of mosques was not in order, and many mosques were
falling to ruins.
Yes, and got dilapidated. And
of course, we can mention, for example, the Zahar Babers mosque that has been destroyed, in mosque and school that has been destroyed in Mu'azz-el-Din last street, in order to widen the street nearby, right? So a lot of
not
structure.
only that, I mean, when Ismail, modernized Cairo, he destroyed also many things. For instance, he cut the Sharia Muhammad Ali in the center of the old town, and it is a very modern, straight way and very modern, and the same had been done in Paris too.
Yes. By the same man,
Oh, yes.
the Baron.
But it also meant the destruction of many mosques and everything.
So
and Tawfiq was afraid that the European powers would use this as a pretext for intervention in Egypt, that Egypt doesn't care for its monuments.
Oh, yes. So this was the start of doing the committee.
Yes, it was one. The second aspect was really that Tawfiq was interested in these things, but it was not merely his personal interest, but also that he wanted to look after the restoration of Islamic monuments, because the pharaonic monuments already had a
Maspero and had, of course.
Yes, and they had an independent
Merit and
office.
Maspero, yes. But this Pasha.
And for instance, British newspapers and French newspapers, they were all the way writing about that mosques in Egypt are falling apart, and blah, blah, blah. And I think it was a dangerous situation. And so he founded a committee, and so they started working on it. But at the beginning, it was a little bit complicated, because the committee... Well, actually, and it is very important to emphasize that the committee was a section of the Waqf ministry. So it was not... Later on, and even today, many people who are ignorant, they say that the committee was an alien institution to Egypt and did all this and that. No, the committee was a section of the Waqf ministry.
The Ministry of Endowments.
Yes.
Endowments. So when we talk about that, so Max Herz got hooked and started his working career in Egypt since 1870 with the committee.
Yes, not with at the beginning he was not on the committee. At the beginning he was in the technical department of the Waqf ministry. He was a draftsman and he made drafts. Rassam or so.
Yes, and then what?
And then it was so that and at the beginning there were many problems between the technical department of the Waqf ministry and the committee, because the committee was interested in restoration and keeping things and so as they are, while the technical office of the Waqf ministry had methods which were just the opposite what the committee. They were interested in building new mosques and so on and so on. And they were also supposed to do what the committee decided, and there were many tensions. And then in 1890, it was so that around 1890 that the committee received a technical department of its own.
Really, yes.
Which was only interested in executing what the committee wanted to do, restorations and preservation and such things. And at the same time, Hertz was named and a post was created for him to head the committee's technical department, and he became Bash Muhandis Legnat Hifz al-Asar. And
this was 1890.
Around 1890.
That's 2 years before Abbas Helmi II.
Yes, it was so that in 87 Franz resigned because he retired, because he considered himself old, or so he retired, and he suggested to the Egyptian government that his position in the committee should go to Hertz. And simultaneously, this office, this technical office of the committee was created, and the position of Hertz as Bash Muhandis, and from that time on he was actually heading the committee. It doesn't mean that he was a dictator and he dictated everything, because the things were decided in the sessions of the committee, and these committee sessions were always presided by the Waqf minister, and things were decided there. But it was Hertz who kept the things going and who executed the things. What the committee, then he made the suggestions, and the committee then discussed it, and then they made a decision, and so. And it is very important that the half of the committee, well, it changed all the time, but at least half of the committee were always Egyptians, local Egyptian specialists, and the other half were Europeans, and of course, I mean, the Europeans. And I do not want to deny it. It was a period of imperialism, and
the British have been here in Egypt since 1882, and they were always trying to make the positions to be held by foreigners, Europeans in general, and British in particular.
Yes, but at the same time, you see, for instance, there is an American lady, American scholar, Paula Sanders, who claimed in a book which had been published I don't know how many years ago here in the American University, that the British were directing the committee on a day-to-day basis, and it was and the committee was in fact a British institution. But I don't know how many years ago, I think it was 2015, I went to London, and in the British in the National Archives in Kew, I wanted to go through the correspondence of the British residency here in Cairo. Well, it is a very modest name, residency, but in fact Lord Cromer and I mean the residency was in charge of Egypt at the time, there is no doubt. And I wanted to see how they were involved with the work of the committee. And to tell the truth, I went through many years, and there are many documents. And, Hertz was at the head of the committee for 25 years. He spent 35 years in Egypt, but for 25 years he was the head of the committee.
This was from 1890 or 1887?
1890.
Yes.
1890 until the end of 1914.
Because the World War I, he was asked to leave because he was belonging
to
the
because
of the Austro-Hungarian involvement in the World War I against the Brits.
Yes, right? Yes. And the British authorities forced him into retirement. He was not yet retired, but he received a pension, so they didn't send him away without a pension. So he received his pension, but he was expelled and he had to leave Egypt at the end of 1914 in December. What I wanted to say, in London, I started going through the correspondence of the residency with London, with the Foreign Office and so on, and the residence here, and I was looking for documents on the involvement of the residency with the committee, and there was hardly anything. Mm-hmm. And you know, it is not true that the British, the British tried to, they had a very special, so to say, way of following their policy. If something was running well, and the committee was running well, then they didn't interfere. Then they let them do what yes. So actually, you see, after a while, after 10 years, I stopped because I found nothing.
All right. So we talk about in the period from 1890, he was involved as the day-to-day basis of the administration of the committee, and especially in the restoration of the Islamic monuments. Yes. When we go to these Islamic monuments today, we find a lot of inscriptions, especially during the reign of Abbas Helmi II, that this has been restored during the reign of Abbas Helmi II. Or, for example, we see that the mosque of Imam al-Shafi'i was built during the Tawfiq reign, and all with the new Mamluk style, if we may use the expression. So tell us about the role of Max Herz in this period. He was involved in restoration and also in building the new mosques on the style of the new Mamluk.
No, Max Herz was mainly involved with restoration and preservation of old mosques. He personally, as a private architect, also designed some neo-Mamluk buildings, but not many. But at that time, but he loved the neo-Mamluk style and also Mamluk architecture in general, old Mamluk architecture in general. He loved it very much. He considered it beautiful and of a very high quality, and he loved it. Yes, but the committee did not build new mosques. At that time, some new mosques in Neo-Mamluk style, the new mosques were built by the Waqf administration and not by the committee.
And he, as an architect, was not involved in mapping them or drawing their drawings, right?
No.
Okay.
There was one which is a Neo-Mamluk piece, a Neo-Mamluk monument, with which he was involved, but not as Bash Muhandis of the committee, but Abbas Hilmi II personally asked him to finish it, and it was the Rifai Mosque.
Yes, this is what.
But it was not. It had nothing to do with the committee.
Yes,
it was because because at that time Max Herz was considered to be the best expert on Neo-Mamluk style.
So, after the break, we have to take a break now. We'll talk about the role of Max Herz in a Rifai mosque, because it's a lot of controversy about this mosque in particular. Stay tuned to us on Radio Cairo, and we're having our dear guest, Professor Istvan Ormos, the professor of Arabic and Islamic Studies in Budapest, and coming all the way from Budapest to give a very valuable talk about Max Herz. Stay tuned to us. So you're still listening to Radio Cairo. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad is still at the control, and we're with you until 5 p.m. And we are having an interesting talk with Professor Istvan Ormos, the Hungarian professor of Arabic and Islamic Studies in Budapest University, and a continuous talk about the interesting Max Herz. we talked about how Max Herz was given a project as a side project by an order from the Khedive Abbas Helmi II to continue the mosque that was started to be built by his grandmother to be not only a mosque but also a place of burial for the Muhammad Ali family. And this mosque is standing gloriously today beside the pearl of the mosques, that is Sultan Hassan Mosque. So the mosque that continue the facade, or the mosque that you can see beside Sultan Hassan, is considered to be a new mosque in comparison to the history of Egypt, and it was finished in the after 1914. So talking about this mosque in particular, it has a special history. Tell us about the history and tell us about the role of Max Herz, please.
Well, the mother of Khedive Ismail, Khoshyar Hanem, decided to build a mosque which should then be, in Islam, women were very often very potential and patrons of mosques. It was nothing special that a rich lady started building a mosque. And Khoshyar also decided to build a mosque, which she thought would also serve as a mausoleum for her descendants. Actually, it was not quite new, not absolutely new, this new mosque which she wanted to build, because on the site there had been such a small mashhad, but a very modest one, and she wanted to widen it and make it very sumptuous and so on and so on. And
that's the mausoleum of Al-Rifai,
yes,
one of the Sufis sheikhs.
Yes, and it was also some sort of I wouldn't say difficulty, but it was very important that there were several tombs already there in this Mashhad's mausoleum of Arifai, and the new mosque had to be built in such a way that they wouldn't disturb the tombs.
Yes.
And they would remain in the same place. And so it happened.
So she has given the task to a very famous Ottoman or a Turkish architect who was a resident in Egypt, and he has studied in France, and his name was
Hussein Fahmi. But you say Ottoman architect, yes, maybe he was a member of the Khedive family. He was a member of, he was a close relative of the Muhammad Ali's family. He was born in Kavala in Greece, in the same town where Muhammad Ali was born. Yes. And so he came to Egypt, and as a young man, I don't know how old he was when he came to Egypt, and then he studied in France with one of those very famous these student delegations who were sent by the Egyptian government to study in France. Mainly in France, not only in France, but mainly in France. And he was with one of them. It is very funny that, and many people make a mistake, that his name, he was called in this group Küçük Hussein, that means Hussein the small one. But it was not because he was small, he was very tall, but there were two Husseins in the group, and he was the younger one.
Okay. So Küçük Hussein started building the mosque.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the Khedive mother, that's Khedive Ismail mother, ran out of funds, of course, with the in-debt that she was having, and the stoppage of building went for a very quite long time. And then when they returned, they had the funds, and Abbas Helmi II had the funds to fulfill the dream of his grandmother. Unfortunately, Küçük Hussein, or the architect, was already dead.
Yes. You see, they started building the mosque in 1869, and it went on for a while, and they reached the crenellation, so it is nearly, the top of the main facade. And but there were problems with statics and with sort of stone they used, and works came to a halt, and then but then the problems in Egypt came too, so that state bankruptcy under Ismail, and then the expulsion of Ismail, and Khoshyar died, and Hussein died too. And so for about 25 years, there was this torso, the part of standing there in front of Sultan Hassan, and then 25 years later, Abbas Hilmi II commissioned Hertz to finish the work, which was not his grandmother. Khoshyar was his great-grandmother,
yes.
Had been his great-grandmother. And Hertz, he had a very good connection to Küçük Hussein. He was also, he had been his first boss in Egypt and the Waqf ministry, because he was also minister of Awqaf and so on. This Hussein, and he was personally related. When he had retired to Shubra, he didn't like big festivities. He preferred staying in his home in Shubra and contemplating and so on. And Hertz very often visited him until his death, and then. When Hertz was asked to finish it by Abbas Hilmi, then Hertz at first wanted to see the plans of Hussein Fahmi, but he couldn't find them. There was only one drawing which he could find in the Ministry of Awqaf. It was the facade facing Sultan Hassan, with the two minarets, which you could find, but nothing else. And so then, and of course, out of respect for Hussein, he wanted to follow his
original
drawing, and also his original plans, but there were none of them, and so he made corrections to the original building, what he had already found there, because he improved the statics and so on. But there were no plans there were two drawings of the minarets, but very simple drawings, and the domes of the Rifai Mosque, and also there was nothing about the interior, except for some inscriptions for which the templates had already been done at the beginning by a famous, I forgot his name, but by a famous Egyptian khattat, epigraphist. And
so when we talk about the mosque, some people would say that the mosque, when you see it from the outside, it has some of the windows are arranged like crosses, so it looks like a cathedral. We were discussing this off air, and you told me no, actually this is part of the original drawing of
not only the drawing, when they stopped. The cross was already there.
Yes, so it was quite strange to have this structure. And Max Herz have been accused by a lot of people.
I know
that he's the one who did the cross. You heard it many times.
We have photos. So if you come to my presentation, I will show you a photo there
on the building when it stopped before Max Herz taking over.
Yes, before Max Herz even arrived to Egypt.
So when we talk about
and to tell the truth, I'm not sure about that cross, whether the architect Hussein Fahmi I mean, that he really meant it as a cross.
Of course
I'm
not.
not
He
sure.
didn't mean it as a cross, but I mean he meant it as a sort of an illumination, because the use of the colored window glasses in mosques definitely very much bring a lot of serenity of light inside the mosque. The more you have colored windows, the more you have beautiful feelings inside, or feelings of meditation inside the mosque, because the sun, which is always continuously rising from the east, illuminate the mosque beautifully. When you can see that in the mosque of Sultan Hassan, unfortunately the dome of the tomb is put in front of the main court for prayers, so you only have this impression inside the dome, which is for the tomb. But in Rifai, you have the beautiful light coming from different perspectives and giving beautiful serenity for the prayers. I think that's why Hussein Fahmi did this. Used a lot of glass windows to influence the prayers as they are doing their prayers. But when we talk about the inside of the mosque, these were made mostly by Hertz, and this is a lot of ornamentation. So he was going more into a Baroque style, like structuring inside. A lot of ornamentation are used.
No, the ornamentation is mainly,
but of course,
it's Islamic.
Yes, of course, it's Islamic. I mean, extensive use of the colors, which is more looking like what we have seen in Muhammad Ali's mosque, with the use of a lot of colors. Muhammad Ali has used the alabaster. He has used the marble in different beautiful drawings of structuring. He has taken this from late Mamluk style, more or less.
Yes, I think so. And
he was a great fan of late Mamluk.
He was a great fan of Mamluk style and also late Mamluk style. And you know, the Rifai Mosque was, I mean, of course, it is a very complicated building because the ground plan, which comes from Hussein Fahmi, it is like that of a cathedral.
Yes, this is
the ground plan.
Yes,
it is not Mamluk at all, but from outside it looks like a Mamluk building, and many people even today mistake it for a authentic Mamluk building, and they say that it is contemporary with Sultan Hassan,
which is totally not true, because Sultan Hassan is an early Mamluk. The huge size of the dome and the minarets are modest in comparison to the huge size of the dome. We see in the late Mamluk we have tall minarets and a smaller dome. This is the structure that has been popularized in the 19th century mosques that were built as a sort of a resurrection of the late Mamluk. We can see that in Tawfiq design of Shafi'i mosque, or we can see that also in Sayyidah Nafisa and of course in Sayyidah Aisha, the use of the styles of small domes and long minarets.
But actually, it is a very interesting thing. I don't know if it had been done on purpose or if it is just by mere chance, that the ground plan of Rifai, coming from originated, it was done by Hussein Fahmi. It is that of a cathedral, of a European cathedral. You know, it is symmetric and so on. Mamluk buildings are not really symmetric, but there is a very interesting thing, that if you enter the Rifai Mosque from the main entrance, not the entrance which is usually used today on the opposite facing Sultan Hassan, but from the square from Sharia Muhammad Ali. If you enter, that's the main entrance, which is nowadays normally closed. But if you enter the entrance from the mosque from there, then you cannot proceed directly to the mihrab, because what would one expect to do in a cathedral? Because there is a tomb.
Yes,
and you have to and you have to go around it, and it is a sort of a Mamluk feature that there are so many cars.
There's shaped tunnels that helps to bring you and prepare you to go inside the mosque. Always there is the idea of the Mamluks in building mosques is to use this S-shaped tunnels to reduce the effect of the noise and the light. Brings you through mysteriously enlightened paths as you go from extreme light and noise to indirect light and no noises, and therefore you will have more time to prepare yourself for the meditation of prayers. And this is what is so unique about the Islamic monuments during the Mamluks' time.
Yes, but and you are perfectly right, but it is only half of the truth, because the Mamluks used these curved entryways also because they used their mosques very often as fortresses, and it was they could defend themselves much better if the way was
especially of course for the Sultan Hassan Mosque, which has been used also a place for folly between the mutineers and the governor on the top of the citadel. So when we talk about Max Herz and his role in doing or building the mosque, and did he have a chance to be present in the inauguration? But I think
yes. The inauguration was wait a minute, I think 1913, and it was actually for completing the Rifai Mosque that he was promoted a grade higher on the civil list, and so he was promoted to the grade of Mir Miran, and that meant that he was allowed to use the honorary title Basha. Before that, I mean, most of his life and career in Egypt, he was a bey. He became Pasha only
on the inauguration day of the mosque.
Yes.
So his role in restorations we can see and we can feel in all of the milestones that are written on the mosques. Anything that is related to Abbas Halmi II, most probably it was done under his patronage, right, sir?
Yes,
we talk about, for example, the Qaitbay Mosque in the beautiful northern cemetery.
The Qaitbay, he restored the Qaitbay Mosque. He subjected it to complete restoration, and he managed to finish it too, because he regarded it as a jewel of world architecture.
It is one of the most beautiful mosques. It is the one on the top of the £1 note, right?
Oh, yes.
And so when we talk about his role, in your presentation that you are going to give in Cairo, you have just touched also the role of Max Herz in restoration and the building of Rifai Mosque. What else are you going to talk about?
Well, I will talk about, actually, I will not give a regular presentation on Max Herz from his birth until his death, because I have done it so many times and I need a change. So I will give a number of interesting aspects of his activities and also connected to these buildings. And for instance, in connection, I will also talk about the Qaitbay Mosque in the desert, in the Sahara.
Northern Cemetery, yes.
And for instance, there is one aspect on which I will talk, and which is, it is not unknown and it is not my invention, but people are usually not aware of it, that, you know, that the Sahn in the middle of the mosque is now covered with a beautiful lantern, and it is really wonderful. And actually, when Hertz arrived here, it was not covered, the Sahn, and there were debates whether it should be covered or originally it had been covered.
We're talking about Qaitbay, huh?
Qaitbay.
Yes.
And or if it should be covered or it should not be covered. It was known at that time that the lantern and the ceiling had fallen down, I don't know, 20 years earlier or something like that, or 10 years earlier. But it was also known, we know it from Jabarti, that it was not the original ceiling. And nobody really knew if it had been originally it had been covered or not, and so whether it should be restored or not. Second, the problem was that certainly nobody knew what the originals
looked like. Yes.
Looked like, but it it was a relatively late Mamluk building, mosque, and from that period we have a number of mosques. Qadi Yahya Zainuddin in the Ashar area, and a number of Abu Bakr Mashar and so on, but none of them had their ceilings. So, because normally it was so in this period that if something was missing in one mosque, then you could copy it from another one because they all looked so similar. And they were all beautiful. But concerning the ceiling, nobody really knew what
So
was.
Max decided to build it.
Yes.
And I never knew that, because when you go there, you think it's very authentic.
Yes, it is.
Ceiling.
And it is very beautiful.
It's beautiful indeed.
But actually, it was not he himself. He had an office. And there were young architects who were working under his supervision. And so they created
a matching ceiling.
Yes.
Actually,
and all these and nowadays all these late Mamluk, these Cherkess mosques, the Burgi mosques have their lanterns and ceilings, but all of them are production of the committee.
That's very interesting. So when we talk about Max Herz, he did this work of restoration, and he did some private work as well. You were talking about Zuhaib Villa, but
yes.
Unfortunately it was demolished in the early 60s. Other works also?
Well, a private work of his, which was not a new building, but at that time, towards the end of the 19th century, around 1898, there was a Greek tobacco manufacturer in Cairo, Janaklis. And
So
he bought the villa of a former Egyptian minister, Ahmed Khairi Basha, and we don't really look. We think it looked some like an Italian villa, which were very fashionable in the Ismailia quarter in downtown Cairo at that time. But I have never seen a photo of this villa, and he commissioned Hertz, whom he had known from their joint work in Chicago in the World's Exhibition.
Yes,
and he commissioned Hertz to transform this villa into a Neo-Mamluk villa. And he wanted a Neo-Mamluk villa because Neo-Mamluk villas were very fashionable at that time, and in addition it would serve as a good propaganda, a group advertisement for his cigarettes and tobacco, which he was selling all over the place, all over in Europe. And at that time, tobacco was
So it was not is it the current AUC now, or not this one?
This?
Is it the current old building of the AUC in Medina?
Yes.
This is the one.
Yes.
This is Max Hertz's work.
Yes.
So whenever you go to Meydan al-Tahrir or Tahrir Square, you'll see the beautiful building that used to be the American University in Cairo. And
Hertz.
it's Hertz,
Yes.
which makes it very special.
And you know what? We have to thank the American University that, first Janaklis used it. But then Janaklis moved part of it was used as a family building, as offices, and also in the back part, it was his factory there. But then when his factory was going, he moved it to Shubra. And then at first he lent it out at first at the beginning of the 19th.
Egyptian University in the beginning, and then after the Egyptian
they found it was too expensive, and they moved out.
Yes,
and then after that, the American University, which was had been newly founded at that time,
originally it was a high school, and then it changed into university, and this makes it very special. Also, we didn't touch a very important role of Max Herz in the Grand World Expo in Chicago. A lot of question marks have been made about his work in taking some of the originals and putting it in this expo. Could you just tell us in 1 minute, was this true?
Well, this is a very sad and very funny story at the same time. There are two things. Many Mashrabiyah balconies were taken to the Chicago fair at that time because Mashrabiyah balconies were going out of the fashion. But it was not Hertz who bought the Mashrabiyah balconies, but the manager of the... there were so many Mashrabiyah balconies, and people were getting rid of Mashrabiyah balconies.
So Max Herz was not involved in... Max Herz was not involved in this, right? More or less.
No. He at that time he was director of the Arab Museum, and the Arab Museum had a number of Mashrabiyah balconies, and they didn't want to buy more because they were so they were on the market because people wanted glass windows and so on instead of this.
It's a real pity.
Yes. And so they were taken. But there is another story. An American art historian invented this story that Hertz. There was a copy of the Abdurrahman Sabil Khuda's Sabil Kutab in Chicago.
Yes.
And that Hertz tore out the grills of the original one and took them to Chicago.
This is totally untrue because the grills are untrue. This is very good. It's good to clear the reputation of such a great man. Yes. Sir, thank you very much for coming and taking the time to come to our program. We really have exchanged a lot of food for thought about a great architect, Max Herz Pasha, the Hungarian architect who started his career and finished his career in Egypt and finished it with grandeur by building a Rifai mosque and done a lot of restorations of mosques in Egypt and a great sort of cooperation between Egypt and Hungary. We had the pleasure of having with us today Professor Istvan Ormos, Professor of Arabic and Islamic Studies in Budapest University. We talked about the great Max Herz Pasha. Thank you very much, sir, for the time.
Thank you.
My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad was at the control. See you same time, same station. And thank you again, sir.
Thank you very much.